this is our first competition that you're in, the full 30-minute presentation. Of course, tomorrow you'll be doing the 10-minute, and you will be doing the 90-second as well. I'll have my colleagues introduce themselves in a moment. My name is Jim Arnold. I am a professor at the University of St. Thomas in Minneapolis, and this is my 6th year of being a judge with IBECC. I've been on the board for 6 years, and it's always a pleasure to be able to work with fine professionals like you all and learn some things from you as well. I have some other things that I need to read to you, but let's start with my colleagues here to introduce themselves.
I'm Ken Goodpaster, and I've been associated with this competition for many years. And I'm an Uber judge, but I'm functioning right now as a regular, plain old vanilla judge.
My name's Stan Botts, and I've been doing it a few years myself, probably just a few short of what Ken has. And my credentials are similar.
What we will do is everyone hears the same set of instructions so we can keep the ground level. I don't think you're going to learn anything new here, but it's important that everybody hears the exact same thing. Now, in this part of the competition, you are taking on a fictional business identity and assigning a fictional business identity to the judges. So, please make sure everyone knows who you are and who we are before you begin. So we'll give you a second to do that unless you want to do it within your presentation. You're going to have 25 minutes plus a 5-minute cushion. So it's basically 30 minutes. I have set my timer to 25. So when it goes off, and you'll know that you've got 5 minutes left to wrap things up. And we are not going to be interrupting you while you are speaking. We are going to wait until the very end, and then we will ask you questions for about 20 minutes. During the Q&A period, we will remain in the role that you have set for us, and so will you. We will keep the roles that we've been assigned during the Q&A session. After the Q&A, we will take our costumes off, and we will just be regular people, and you will be regular students, and we'll give you some feedback on some of the things that we heard. And if you have any questions for us as well, we would be more than happy. Now, the ethical aspects of your analysis are the most important, but you need to make sure to describe them in simple, practical, and common sense fashion, using technical philosophical terminology. If you base your ethical argument on religion or theological grounds, those are considered a serious weakness. And also, any member of the team, that if you read your part, it's okay to use notes, but if you stand and read, that's also considered a major mistake. Everyone here has a speaking role, I can see. So would you please start out and tell us exactly who we are so we understand?
Yeah, so you're the board of HSBC, and we're VCT Consulting, who you've asked us to address some concerns for ethical behavior in your company.
Okay, we are now the board of directors of HSBC, and once again, welcome and good luck to you.
Good afternoon. You, the board of HSBC, asked us 6 months ago to address your concerns for ethical behavior in your company. Today, we, VCT Consulting, are here to present to you our findings. We will begin by outlining the problem, the cause, and then we'll move to discussing why you need to address this problem, and finally, our proposed solution. So firstly, we've identified the problem as that despite expressed ethical intentions, your bank continues to be involved in ethical scandals. In recent years, banking industry's unethical behaviour has been put under a spotlight. After each ethical scandal comes rebranding statements and the accused banks claiming that they're going to pick up their acts. However, these scandals continue to occur. This is often followed by huge fines and new legislation. However, the banks are often diverted from the criminal process and continue to operate while there are still no employees dealt with jail terms. The uncovering of these unethical and potentially illegal scandals often occur, and most recently, last month uncovering of the Panama Papers highlights this. So why does this keep happening?
We believe the cause can be explained by biases. VCT Consulting specialises in using behavioural ethics to help organisations become the businesses they strive to be. Behavioural ethics is a field in psychology that studies the ways that people make moral decisions. Recent research has shown that people often act unethically without their conscious awareness. This occurs because cognitive biases mix with cultural factors to cause irrational thought processes. As a result, leading business ethicist and Harvard professor Max Baseman has argued that wise business solutions should target the cultural factors that impact employee decision making. That is exactly what we are going to do for you. Our decision making is constantly affected by these biases, which are in turn exacerbated by our cultural environment. A toxic combination can result in irrational and unethical decisions. Cognitive biases are systematic errors in thinking that affect the judgments that we make. While there are too many biases to list here, we will concentrate on just 3 biases that we see are crucial to HSBC's problem. The 3 biases are ethical fading, motivated blindness, and loss aversion.
Ethical fading is the process by which ethical dimensions are eliminated from a decision when you're making it. For example, if I was making a decision as to which company I should invest in, unless I gave specific ethical credence to the ethical dimensions of this, the financial complexity of that decision would mean that I would eliminate it from my mind.
Motivated blindness describes the common failure of people to notice others' unethical behaviour when seeing that behaviour would harm them. For example, with the collapse of Enron prompted many to ask how its auditing firm vouched for Enron's financial health, at the time that Enron was concealing billions of dollars of debt from its shareholders. The answer is that Enron was its second largest client, and it had an incentive to let it go unnoticed. Overall, motivated blindness is as simple as this. If person A has an incentive to see person B favourably, then they will.
Loss aversion refers to the significant weight being put on losing things compared to the gains. There are examples of this in everyday life and is the basis for what is called the sunk cost fallacy in economics. It explains how people will try almost anything to avoid incurring losses, including unethical behaviour.
So today we're going to look at 2 examples of scandals that have been caused by these 3 cognitive biases, and in particular we're going to look at the recent money laundering and tax evasion scandals at HSBC. So the money laundering scandal of 2012 resulted in HSBC having to pay the largest fine in financial history, all $1.9 billion US. And they had to pay this because they had engaged in money laundering activities, laundering the money of Mexican drug cartels, as well as ignoring potential links between their customers and terrorist groups in the Middle East. And with this scandal, we can see two particular cognitive biases shining through, that of ethical fading and motivated blindness. So ethical fading here occurred because of the complexity of the finance industry and the complexity of the work that the employees do. Because there are no ethical systems in place currently, it's very easy for them to succumb this ethical dimension to the financial necessities that they have to comply with, that is, making as much money for the bank as possible. Similarly, motivated blindness occurred because, well, they're not going to look at, they're going to be blind to ethical behaviour if it means, not being blind means that the bank isn't going to make as much money as it possibly can. The tax evasion scandal is another example of cognitive bias causing unethical behaviour. Just last year, HSBC Private, as you know, your private wealth management arm, was investigated by the Swiss authorities for helping wealthy individuals avoid tax. And of course, just a few weeks ago, HSBC was outed in the Panama Papers for its creation of well over 2,000 shell companies, which also served a similar purpose, that's to help wealthy people avoid tax. Now in this instance, we can see that loss aversion and motivated blindness were responsible for this. Motivated blindness had the same implication as before. That is, employees were blind to the unethical behaviour of other employees because it was not in their interest as members of a financial organisation to expose it. Similarly, loss aversion occurred here because the bank was too afraid of losing these incredibly lucrative, wealthy customers to other banks by saying, no, we're not going to provide you with these tax-efficient solutions.
We want to be clear here. Your company is not full of bad people. It's people who on occasion behave badly. We believe this is due to HSBC employees not understanding the cognitive biases and the poor environment at HSBC not allowing them to address these. This has in turn led to the unethical action causing the recurrent scandals. We want to stress that the problem isn't cognitive biases in itself. It's the fact that they are not understood and not being addressed. Cognitive biases, such as the ones we've outlined, help us live effective lives, such as using heuristics to make faster decisions. What we are saying here is that HSBC has a duty to attend to these biases and avoid them by using them ways to lead ethical outcomes. And you might be thinking, why does HSBC have this duty?
We will now run through the ethical dimension, legal dimension, and financial dimension of the problem. Firstly, the ethical dimension, which includes HSBC's ethical obligation, moving on to analyse HSBC's neglect of the biases through the frameworks of outcomes, processes, and purpose. So why does HSBC have an ethical obligation? Put simply, HSBC's ethical obligation is derived from two key factors. Put simply, HSBC is a huge organisation. This means that tangible harms of its decisions are magnified, so that every decision that HSBC makes can have a huge impact on people's lives. Secondly, HSBC is a financial institution with the capacity to influence the consumer behaviour and the strategic behaviour of firms. It therefore has an obligation to positively influence these behaviours. Is there a conflict of rights at play here? No. In this case, it is absolutely clear that the right thing to do is to abide by the law. Now for the frameworks. We will look at three frameworks of outcomes, processes, and purpose to analyse the ethicality of HSBC's actions. To decide on whether HSBC's failure to attend to the biases is unethical, we will now look at the outcomes of this failure. In particular, whether its outcomes promote the greatest good for the greatest number of people. There are three major outcomes from HSBC's failure to attend to these biases. First, it directly promotes a large amount of harmful activity because irrational decisions lead to HSBC investing in damaging ventures. Secondly, the opportunity cost of investing in unethical and illegal ventures means that resources are directed away from more ethical ventures. As a result, good ventures fail while harmful ventures prosper. Thirdly, failure to attend to these biases contributes to the harmful precedent of banks neglecting their biases, causing harmful decisions. Thus, these three outcomes are unethical, as they fail to promote the greatest good for the greatest number of people. To achieve a more holistic appraisal of the ethicality of HSBC's failure to attend to these biases, we will now examine the processes within this action. To act ethically, we should apply our principles consistently. As a consequence of neglecting the biases shaping HSBC's decisions, it cannot consistently apply its principles. Furthermore, decisions are made on an irrational basis. As a result, HSBC's decision-making process is unethical because it does not follow its own principles consistently. A final way to examine whether HSBC is acting ethically is to assess whether its actions contribute to its societal role. As a financial institution, your role is to provide financial services to allow the economy to function so that people can pursue their aims. HSBC already acknowledges this in its purpose statement, stating that they aim to help people fulfil their hopes and realise their ambitions. HSBC's failure to attend to the cognitive biases leads to the opportunity cost of ethical ventures being deprived of the opportunity to fulfil their hopes and ambitions. Therefore, HSBC's failure to attend to these biases is unethical because it fails to fulfil its role in society. As we have seen, these frameworks of outcomes, processes, and purpose all conclude that HSBC's neglect of these biases is unethical.
We will now look at legally why you have an obligation to act. You need to attend to these biases causing these ethical scandals for three main reasons. And we see that there are three potential outcomes that these scandals will continue to incur if they remain to be uncovered. There's a real threat that HSBC could have its licence removed. Following this, HSBC as a bank would cease to exist. This is a serious problem for society. HSBC at least has an obligation to provide its customers the financial services and to maintain success of their business for their shareholders. Alternatively, at best, with its current behaviour, HSBC could continue to be diverted from the criminal process. However, public opinion of banks is poor. And with the repeated scandals and misconducts, our law will continue to evolve to reflect our society's values. This is already beginning to happen. There is a new common reporting standard that is being outlaid in countries all over the world, such as the Cook Islands and Switzerland, which will make it much harder for people to avoid taxes. This dictates the direction in which HSBC must move. HSBC should act now to address these biases. Legally, this would lead to not only fewer legal fines, but will also lead the cause for greater banking culture in the industry, and ensure that they are compliant with society's values beyond the law, avoiding potential future legal disputes as our legal system continues to evolve. So just to summarise, there are 3 potential outcomes legally here, ranging from the extreme severity of HSBC ceasing to exist to HSBC leading positive change in the financial industry.
But gentlemen, let's be honest, you're businessmen and you're bankers, and you must be wondering, why is the financial incentive for us to change? And you'd be right, HSBC is a big company. It's got over $2 trillion in assets. It made $18 billion in reported profit last year. But of course, this is a game of big numbers, and we're talking about big fines. $1.92 billion in 2012, the next one's likely to be larger. We're talking about big legal expenses. $1.8 billion last year, and it looks like it's going to keep growing. And more importantly, and biggest of all for a retail bank like yourself, we're talking about big reputational damage. And this is possibly the most important, but also the most uncostable part of the financial analysis. So let's quickly look at fines and legal expenses. So in 2012, HSBC North America paid a $1.9 billion fine for its involvement in money laundering practices. And in the same year, that division made this fine contributed to that division in that same year, making an underlying loss of $1.5 billion. Add in the legal expenses, which amounted to several $100 million, and you can see that HSBC effectively wasted a year with that division. They would have made a profit otherwise, but they made a loss. And we think this is terrible. The opportunity cost of this happening is too great. Because what HSBC is effectively doing is building a house up and then burning it down and then only claiming 70% of that money spent building the house back on insurance. It doesn't make any sense. And I don't think your shareholders will think it makes any sense either. Furthermore, consistent unethical behaviour makes the company a very attractive target for regulators. Consider HSBC the low-hanging fruit in this situation, if you like. What this means is whenever those regulators, and this is going to keep happening more and more, whenever those regulators come under pressure from the public to crack down on those evil bankers, HSBC is going to be the perfect target. And this will just mean that you're going to have to keep paying more and more and more and more in legal expenses. And the overall result of this is going to be significant damage to your reputation. Now, the Harvard Business Review would estimate that about 80% of the firm's market capitalization comes from intangible assets, in particular, the perception of the strength of the brand of the business. So in HSBC, we're looking at about a $56 billion value here. Now, as these scandals keep occurring, what has happened is people have become to lose their faith in the brand. From a customer's perspective, HSBC has been pulling out of regions where it's no longer been legally viable to operate, like Turkey and Brazil. So they've just pulled out on 500 million people. Now, if I was a customer for the bank, I would be wondering, are they going to pull out because suddenly they don't want to operate in my region and not be investing and putting my money in the bank? From a shareholder perspective, HSBC has consistently in the last few years not been making profit estimates because of these legal costs and because of these fines. So they're not sure that they're going to get the absolute best return on their investment. And all of this means that we think that the brand damage caused by these scandals has contributed to the 40% drop in HSBC's share price over the last 3 years. So what can we do about this? Let's have a look at our solutions.
Our solution involves improving the decision-making culture in HSBC, improving your risk management processes, and restructuring remuneration systems. But firstly, we recommend that you create a decision-making environment that increases rationality and combats biases. This should be achieved through altering risk management processes, introducing moral reasoning in decision-making, and documenting decision processes. HSBC should alter its risk management processes because as you have seen from the financial dimension, HSBC is failing to price the ethical risk that the company's decisions incur, resulting in huge opportunity costs. Currently, you have no due diligence filters that go close to pricing this risk. The one that goes remotely close is the final question of the process: is this illegal? By this time in the decision-making process, ethical fading, motivated blindness, and loss aversion are well into play, as the employees have been primed to think of potential profits rather than ethical risk. This priming effect was documented in a study from the Harvard Center for Ethics that showed that people are twice as likely to lie when primed to think about money. To ensure that ethical risk is factored into the risk management, we suggest that you reframe your due diligence process. This will address the biases, and this involves asking what are the ethical implications of the decision acceptable. This will address the biases of ethical fading, motivated blindness, and loss aversion by keeping ethics in the forefront of decision makers' minds and ensuring that unethical actions are filtered out before the allure of potential profits induces these biases. Consequently, HSBC will begin to account for the ethical risk in its risk management practices. Second, HSBC should engage all of its decision makers in iterative moral reasoning. All employees should ask the following questions before making a decision. What are the ethical outcomes of this decision? 2, does this action contribute to the purpose and goals of our business, and why? 3, am I comfortable with the ethicality of this decision and the process we have gone through, and why? And 4, would I be comfortable telling the media about this decision? This process will slow employees' decision making down, increase the rationality of the decisions, and attend to ethical fading. And this will add an ethical dimension to the existing outcome-focused mindset at HSBC. You must then comprehensively document all of these reasoning processes and how they're being used. This allows the process of ethical improvement to become iterative by providing HSBC feedback on how to continually improve these processes and these outcomes. Furthermore, this acts as a commitment device to ensure that ethical reasoning is taken seriously, as decision making can be assessed by managers.
Secondly, we recommend that HSBC facilitate a culture that values ethical decisions by implementing commitment devices and creating role models. This can be implemented in 2 phases. First, we suggest that HSBC implement a devil's advocate process, by which staff are paired with other employees in the company outside their own team so that they can scrutinise each other's decisions and the process that they use to make those decisions. This commitment device ensures that employees remain accountable to their own company and the company's ethical standards. The second phase we suggest is that HSBC should systematically promote and support employees who stand up for what is right in your company. This will incentivise more ethical behaviour by symbolising what HSBC aims to become. This strategy has been proven highly effective in a Fortune 50 company advised by Max Bazerman, where 2 employees who stood up for what was right were promoted to senior positions in the company. A video was then made about them and shown throughout the company. This increased ethical discussions in the company and thus started to shift the company culture to a more ethical one, which is what we see as a third important factor for creating a positive culture change. These 3 evidence-driven recommendations directly combat ethical fading, motivated blindness, and loss aversion by ethics becoming integrated into your business culture with the commitment device of the devil's advocate process.
The third part of our solution is a restructuring of the remuneration system to align bonuses and incentives with ethical as well as financial performance. So we recommend that this restructure take the format of a gateway model for integrating ethical goals into incentive systems. So what this means is that in order to be eligible for a bonus, employees must fulfill a set of specific ethical criteria and considerations in a yes or no fashion. Rio Tinto, an Australian mining company, implemented this with great success when they were trying to improve their culture surrounding workplace safety. In order for their CEO and senior executives to be eligible for a bonus, there had to be no deaths in the company in that year. Similarly, the National Australia Bank also implemented this model successfully, following a Forex trading scandal back in 2005. Such a solution incentivises all employees, but particularly managers and senior executives, to consider the ethical as well as financial implications of their decisions. And in addition to this, it signals that doing business is not a trade-off with ethics, between the ethics and the financials. And what this suggestion targets is motivated blindness and loss aversion, as it becomes in an employee's interest to ensure that they act ethically. Now, of course, you may be wondering, won't this just mean that all our employees go down the road to Goldman Sachs because they'll be able to make more there? And the answer to that is no. HSBC will remain competitive when it comes to employing people, because ultimately the employers can make the same amount of money. They just have to show that they're engaging with the ethical processes first.
So now that we've outlined our solution, how should we put this into place? For implementation, we must emphasise that to solve this complex problem within HSBC, ethical considerations cannot become another box to tick. First, we strongly believe that HSBC must educate employees to become aware of the biases they are susceptible to. Second, you must create a dynamic system which involves employees in the re-evaluation of goals and processes. This will increase employee buy-in and further complement cultural change. And thirdly, the change to be effective cannot be piecemeal. HSBC must act on all of our recommendations to ensure its future prosperity. For example, Rio Tinto, when attempting to address its workplace safety issues, set goals in relation to this. However, the CEO and leadership team failed to lead by example. This let employees know where the real values of the company lied. As a result, change was ineffective. It was only when they changed to a holistic approach that they were able to achieve the change they needed. These implementation recommendations ensure that our solution is positive, effective, and efficient for HSBC. So overall, our solution is to improve the decision-making culture, improve your risk management processes, and restructure remuneration systems. And we've given you the recommendations to implement this properly. But now we will consider the outcomes of our solution, both financial, ethical, and legal. But first, for the ethical outcomes. Our solution addresses ethical fading, motivated blindness, and loss aversion. This reduces the tangible harms of HSBC's action. It increases investment in ethical ventures and sets a positive precedent for other banks, creating an improved financial industry. So overall, our solution helps to create a more prosperous, rational, and ethical society.
5 minutes.
Financially, for only a small initial outlay in capital to align HSBC's existing training structures with our ethical systems, you'll see both an increase in short-term and long-term profits. So in the short term, the reduced regulatory and legal risk means you won't have to budget as much money towards this, and you can instead use that money to better money-making means. You also have a greater ability to avoid fines because there'll be no reason to incur them, which means that you will be able to make the profits that you should be making, particularly in problem areas like North America. And overall, we think this will improve employee involvement and morale, which will further boost productivity at the bank, all of which will lead to increased profits. And of course, increased profits in the short term lead to stronger long-term outcomes. So in the long term, there'll be increased shareholder and consumer confidence. The shareholders won't be worried about you not making your profit targets, and the consumers will not be worried about you pulling out of their areas because it's no longer viable for you to be there. We also think that there'll be a first mover advantage here that HSBC can exploit, because you'll be the first major financial firm to adopt this holistic approach to ethics. And we think what this will provide you with is really fantastic marketing and branding opportunities. You're already the world's local bank, let's make you the world's ethical bank. And we think this will increase your customer base, particularly as customers become more attuned to ethical considerations, all of which will boost your long-term profits.
By implementing these changes, ultimately HSBC will move towards a more legally stable bank. They will reduce the frequency of fines and the damage caused by future disputes, as well as the savings in finding the solution themselves rather than waiting for the regulators to find one for them. This will contribute to upholding the laws and values of our society, and which will in turn encourage greater ethical and legal practice industry-wide.
What we are providing you with today, gentlemen, is a solution that reduces the effects of cognitive biases to deliver positive ethical outcomes. It is a solution that delivers financial stability, and it is a solution that ensures that HSBC is legally compliant above and beyond the law. What we are therefore providing is a solution that provides HSBC with a sustainable, profitable and ethical strategy that will bode it well into the future. You are one of the world's greatest banks. We really want to keep it that way for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I get to ask the first question. My colleagues, their scores count more than mine, but I get to ask the first question. So I'm just going to ask you to, as a board member, I should know this, but my memory has faltered a little bit. How many countries are we in?
72.
Yeah.
72. How are we going to make, to customize some of these notions in a multinational organization where each nation has its own set of values, its own set of beliefs? How are we going to go about that customization?
So I think our solution provides the sort of malleability for the diversified nature of HSBC. So each nation has a bit of decision-making autonomy, but we're promoting this to the central board of HSBC to sort of promote our solution to these companies, and then they can, the reason why we've recommended for implementation this dynamic process is you can start with this solution, and then as you get more employee buy-in, the employees can customise that solution so it works best for the place that you're in.
What's more, HSBC already has a set of house values that they hope to implement out throughout all their businesses. So really what we're just trying to do is extend those values, make them a bit more tangible and a bit more concrete. And of course, there'll need to be some adaptation for different areas, but overall we think, as Charles said, that is built into the solution and the malleability of it.
Thank you. Gentlemen.
With us operating in 72 countries, the challenge of meeting the ethical as well as legal values that exist across the board becomes quite challenging. How are some of our competitors handling the same sorts of challenges, and are they incurring the same level of financial distress that we may be?
Well, as we outlined, banks such as NAB in Australia have implemented similar processes that we were talking about in terms of the ethical sort of steps that you have to take to be able to receive your bonuses, and that was outlaid successfully. With respect to how you think that, sorry, what was the second part?
The second part is how do we compare with other banks who may be operating in similar environments?
So from the Panama Papers, it's come out that HSBC is basically not dealing with this in the best way. So the different jurisdictions it's kind of taking advantage of these different legal jurisdictions. However, there are certainly other banks that are, NAB's an international bank, and they're sort of dealing with these different obligations in quite a good way by promoting this type of cultural change. Yeah.
If you look at your really main competitors, the investment banks, Goldman Sachs, UBS, Credit Suisse, banks like that, when it comes to ethical issues, HSBC is right at the top. And we do not think this is necessarily because there's anything particularly wrong with HSBC that isn't wrong with the other banks, by and large it's bad luck. But that luck is going to keep that bad luck is going to keep happening if you don't start to make the change. Because as I said now in the financial outcomes, HSBC is a very easy target because you already have a history for really poor ethical practice. What's more, you're much larger than most of the other banks. I mean, the fact that you're based in England but you operate from everywhere from Hong Kong down to Africa means of course there's going to be increased risk of ethical violations, which means it's all the more important for you to really try and implement these processes that we're suggesting today.
I have images in my mind of an oil tanker being asked to turn around. And as we all know, it's easier to turn around a speedboat than it is an oil tanker. And you're offering advice to us on the board to turn around an oil tanker. And one of the elements of the turnaround, if I'm hearing you correctly, is to get how did you put it? To get the ethics question first, up higher on the list of priorities when managers are going through their decision-making culture and are exhibiting decision-making culture. And getting the ethical question to be asked first when it has habitually not been asked first is an enormous challenge. And I'd like to hear a little more from you about how you think you can inch that question up higher in the list.
So just 2 points from me. Firstly, it's definitely going to take a lot of leadership in this challenge. As we outlined with Rio Tinto attempting to make safety changes, that it required the leadership to take strong action from the top. But also, that strong action from the top needs to be complemented by action coming from sort of the grassroots. And to do the grassroots work, HSBC already employs organisational psychologists, and we think they can do the role of educating employees to attend to their biases and become, increase sort of rationality in decision making by implementing these reasoning processes.
And also, like, you are right, HSBC is huge, and this is turning them around and refocusing their sort of goals towards a more ethical bank is a big change, but it's been done before, as we sort of outlined with oil and gas companies really moving their focus towards safety. So it can be done, and we believe it needs to be done because, as you've seen, the Panama Papers, the money laundering, and all those sort of things, these things are continuing to come up, and our laws will continue to evolve to reflect the fact that us as a society don't stand for that. So we think you need to act now to avoid the future fines that you could incur.
I think to use your analogy, an oil tanker is difficult to turn around. Absolutely, our systems will take a while to implement and a while to embed into the psyche of the employees. But an oil tanker will turn around if it's going to hit an iceberg down the track, and you're going to be hit with an even bigger fine than the one you received in 2012. And from an employee perspective, they'll turn that oil tanker around if it means that that's the only way they'll get their $1 million bonus. Because as we showed through our remuneration system, in order to get that bonus, which is a large status symbol for many employees, we recognise that and we don't think that's a bad thing, as well as a large portion of their overall income. In order to get that, you have to show that you've demonstrated ethical thinking. And the number one way to do that is to show that the first question you asked was, is this thing ethical? Is this decision ethical? So we think that in those respects, that ship will turn.
Thank you.
As a board, we're very nervous about these findings and the findings. We have a fiduciary responsibility for this organization. So we want to hear from you where you see us as board members devoting our attention, at what level and what vehicles can we use to implement, or first to identify these biases, and then how we go about step to step making these changes. As Mr. Goodpasture said, this is a huge organization, and we've got to start somewhere. But if we don't start somewhere, then the spotlight's going to be pointed right at us. Because we're the ones with the fiduciary responsibility to see to it that this organization operates in an ethical manner and takes the steps that need to be taken. So tell us where you see the identification coming from to address these biases, and then how do we go about, you said starting at the top, how do we go about getting that message to the top and making it go down throughout the organization?
So we think you should start by educating the leadership in each of the different jurisdictions that you operate, because it's only after educating them that they can lead the change that we need. And to do this, I think you should redeploy the organisational psychologists that you already employ. Use them to help leaders understand where in their culture and decision-making processes these biases might be coming into play and transforming things into bad decisions.
We've already tried to highlight the three main biases that are affecting the corporation there, so automatically you're at an advantage. But as Charles said, you've got the staff already to try and start bringing about these changes. And of course, there's a whole host of organisational business psychologists, moral psychologists out there whom HSBC could very easily bring in for a 6-month, 1-year period in order to help facilitate these changes.
Let me follow up on that. Are our organizational psychologists in many ways like the audit committees that audited Enron? Because if they're only going to tell us what we want to hear so they can continue to be compensated in huge fashions, then we're just chasing our tail. We're going to wind up in the same place.
Right. Yeah. I think with the gateway model of remuneration should apply to them as well, so that they're putting these ethical considerations first and how, basically just to tell the truth about the company so that we can actually make changes.
And to a certain extent, you're right, they have been fulfilling that role so far. But I think the very fact that you've had us come in to talk to you, and we definitely wouldn't have told you the things you want to hear, is showing that from a board level, you're realising that there's an issue here. And if the board is able to recognise that, then we think the rest of the company will start to recognise that too. It would be terrible, and I don't think your shareholders would think very much of you here, if you were to get us to come and give you these recommendations and then they find out that you just went, oh, that's not what we want to hear. We'll just keep going back to our organisational psychologists and say, just keep doing what you're doing. This business as usual approach can't keep continuing, and we think that they're ready to step up, and we definitely think that you're ready to step up, as evidenced by the fact that we're speaking to you today.
If I can build on my colleague's concern here, many of the solutions that you've offered to this problem, and I think it's a very sophisticated presentation on that front, have to do with the sort of things that managers do, especially senior managers. Boards are about governance, not about management. And because of that, our tools are more limited, if you will, than a manager's tools might be, because the manager can give orders and can work his or her way down through the organization and cascade solutions and do all of that. We have very little. We can investigate with the audit committee of our board. We can nominate for leadership. We can do things like that. We can hold accountable the senior leadership, and we can fire them, so to speak, and get in people that have values that correspond to the solution here. But there's a difference between what we can do and the audience of some of your prescriptions. And I just wanted to first make that point and see how sensitive you are to that point.
Yeah, so we certainly acknowledge that, and that's why we're suggesting that you need to be targeting the leaders, because they're the ones that are going to have to implement all of this. But we also think that the leaders maybe haven't been doing the job that they have needed to be doing in the past. And so that's why we think the board should exercise some of its powers to hold those leaders accountable and really get them moving on this solution.
But let's not forget, I mean, we've got Mr. Stuart Gulliver, the CEO here, also on the board. And unlike other board members, he is definitely more of a position to set the agenda for the company and talk to these managers and get them going. And while we definitely wouldn't advocate his sacking, of course, your job safe.
Thank you.
While we wouldn't advocate that because we think he's done a tremendous job financially for the company, the board can definitely help him to start to introduce these ethical notions into the lower ranks, based on pressuring him and using its board power.
You know, when I had my right knee replaced, I had to go into physical therapy after the surgery. The physical therapist would come up to me when I was having trouble moving my knee the full angle that I was supposed to. And she said, "Let me help you." I didn't like to hear that because I knew what was coming. If you say that to the CEO, "Let me help you," the CEO has got to be responsive to that offer of help, because sometimes help means pain.
Absolutely, but where there's a $3.5 million bonus at stake, or more importantly, a job. I mean, I think we think the CEO would be quite receptive. In the case of your knee, if you'd said, "Let me help you," or your knee's going to come off, I think you'd be quite willing to help. And absolutely, it's very difficult for someone to tell you, okay, that you've been doing, well, not the wrong thing, but you just haven't been focusing on the right things. But we definitely think that in order for everyone on the board, including the CEO, to fulfill their obligation to the company, fulfill their obligation to the shareholders, this is the sort of tough conversation that needs to be had. HSBC is not going to continue to be the best bank in the world by just skirting away from these difficult conversations. It needs to embrace them head on, and that's how it's going to gain a competitive edge, because that's not what's happening at your competitors.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just turn this off here. We will now switch to a feedback session, but first, relax, have a sip of water, take your shoes off, whatever you need to do. We're just going to give you a little bit of feedback here, if we may. First off, I need to say that I always feel a little bit inferior when I'm in the company of Brits and Australians, because you are so much more elegant in your use of the English language than we Americans are. So it's always fun to listen to. This is a very difficult division that you're in. I've seen them all today, and in your division, and it's a lot of very, very smart people. As I said to the last group, I lose track of the fact that I'm here with an undergrad division, because I teach graduate school, and I see that your level of analysis is right up there as well. So I think you should be very proud of what it is that you did. I'm going to let my colleagues, because their votes count more, I'm going to let them give you a little feedback, and I will round it out.
I had to restrain myself because you preempted me. I was going to ask, should we excuse the CEO from the room? Because I was going to say, maybe we need to talk about, canning him, but you handled that okay. No, I think you all did a great job on a really tough topic. And one of the things that makes it even tougher is that you're dealing with an organization that's in so many different areas, culturally, as well as ethically, because some things that may be okay down in parts of Africa don't fly in New York. And some of the things they may do in London, may not be too well. So it's a really difficult topic to take, but I think you did a good job at trying to harness it in as much as possible. And I think the big thing here is they tell you don't try to eat an elephant at one time, it's in small bites. And where I was trying to take you with my questioning was that you need an entity, tell us to get your, and you finally got there, your psychologist, somebody that's got to go out and study this, identify it, tell us where to get started, and then start to monitor it with a whole process of follow-up, because it becomes a cycle where you identify the problem, you implement the solutions, you check on the solutions achieving what you want them to do, and then you just start it all over again. And in an organization as big as HSBC, that becomes absolute, and it has to start at the top. I only have one reference because I work for Verizon in their ethics office. But when we had a problem because some folks did some bad things. And we were told, fix them, do some things to correct it, or you're gonna pay a huge fine. We started with the CEO. We had a message from the CEO that went to every employee, and the CEO assured us that he was behind us. And so it's gotta start somewhere, and it's gotta have some real clout to it. So I think the thing I was trying to get you to do was to advise that it had to start at some point, and that it goes to a point where there was some real weight behind making these decisions happen.
You did a really good job with the presentation. A little too much reading from cards. It wasn't an overwhelming amount, but it would be nice to detach yourself a little bit more from the cards. And the use of the phrase cognitive biases is appropriate, but don't be afraid to think of those cognitive biases as moral biases. I mean, Bazerman's work has been published under the name of ethical biases, and just to avoid the implication that psychology all by itself is going to solve this problem. It's going to be an assist, a big assist to solving this problem. But clear-headed moral thinking, and I'm not suggesting you didn't do that, it was part of your presentation, but clear-headed moral thinking in combination with psychology and cognitive bias is the 1-2 punch so give yourself, don't be afraid to invoke moral thinking as one of the tools here, as if it might sound too soft or too, less tough-minded or whatever the outside world might think. I think grab hold of ethics with a little more gusto, and but on the whole, this was a very good presentation. You should be proud of yourselves.
As my colleague has said, the cards, we've seen it over a few years, and believe me, you know your information well enough, you can do it without it. It's just a crutch. You feel a little more comfortable with it in your hand. Tomorrow, when you do the 90-second piece, 10-minute piece, give it a try. Give it a shot. You'll be okay. And I think one of the things that will probably help you early on, you all were going from one to the other. If you had just a little longer piece that you grab a hold of and stay with, you'd probably feel a little more comfortable. But I think it was kind of like you were doing a song, and you wanted to make sure you came in on the right note. And I could tell from what you were doing, you knew the information, you didn't need it.
Yep, clearly very knowledgeable. I like the way that you understood who we were, and you always, I would say 95% of the time, you tailored it to who we were by saying you and HSBC, not they. There was a couple of times where I felt a little bit talked down to. We haven't been very ethical in the past. Well, I've been CEO for a lot of years. I'm old, so you might want to rephrase stuff like that. That I have been in charge of an unethical company for this many years. But I mean, that's just a really small piece. I will echo what my colleagues say about note cards and things like that. I do think you knew your material extremely well. It's okay to have something sitting on the table if you need it, but I don't think that you need it. If you just set it over there, and it can be a crutch that you don't use. So keep that in mind. We. In most case competitions that are hosted by people who are really out in the corporate world, they would tell you that if you walked into an executive meeting and you were using note cards in front of executives, that would not be a good idea. So I'm just going to leave you with that information. I really enjoyed it, though. I thought you were extremely professional, and definitely an honor to work with you. A pleasure to listen to you. If we have no other things, do you have any questions for us at all? Or? This is your big chance to talk to the CEO.
Don't get a job.
Sure. Yeah, drop your resume out. Okay. Thank you very much.